Alrighty, friends, we are going to spend some time now rereading this page of this story, and we want to really think about what is the main idea? What is the big idea, what this page is all about, and what are some details that I can use to show my thinking? We're going to go back and forth, and we're going to use this chart right here to help us determine what is the main idea and what are some supporting details I can use to show it. So looking at our chart, we can say that we know the main idea is the most important thing about a topic. We know the topic is the who or what. And if you forget that, that's okay. You can look here at step 1. It says find the topic. And if we follow the arrow, it tells us the topic is who or what the text is mostly about. So when we want to know, once we figure out what the topic is, who or what the page is mostly about, the main idea is going to be the big idea about that topic. And we're going to find supporting details that tell us more about that main idea. We're going to first find the topic. We're going to read and think about who or what is this page mostly about. Then we're going to look for clues that are going to help us find those supporting details. These right here are the supporting details because just like this chair, they hold up the main idea. Some examples of supporting details are going to be, what does the author say about the topic? What are some events related to the topic? And what are some illustrations or examples that also tell me more about the topic? So we can see that we're not going to be able to do step 2 if we don't first do step 1, if we find out who or what the text is mostly about. And then for step 3, we're going to put it all together. We're going to use the topic and the supporting details to say what the main idea is. So now that we know what our steps are, let's read the page again and then go and practice together. Your thinking job while I read aloud is to follow along with the red dot and think about who or what is this page mostly about. Let's see, where did my red dot go? Here we go. At last he stands. He chooses a stick and dips it into a can of syrupy paint. Slowly, he circles the canvas, stepping around the edges, straddling the corners. Black lines form a tangled web. Now he chooses a brush, working toward the middle. Sprays of color, tan, teal, yellow, and white. An athlete with a paintbrush. He uses his whole body to make the painting. Layers build with each gesture, new colors emerging, blending, and disappearing into the wet surface. He swoops and leaps like a dancer, paint trailing from a brush that doesn't touch the canvas. I want to make a longer and longer line. I want to keep it going. Alrighty, we have reached the end of our page. Take a moment to think about what you heard, and now we're going to look for the topic. Who or what is the text mostly about? So for the topic here, to show my thinking steps, I'm going to say step 1, the topic is Jackson Pollock. That is who this page is mostly about. The whole time there are no other characters, it's only Jackson Pollock, and the only thing the author is telling us is how he paints. So for step 2, I'm looking for some supporting details. Now, if I go back to my highlighter, I'm going to highlight some supporting details that tell me what does the author want me to know about Jackson Pollock? What's the big idea about Jackson Pollock? What's he doing in this page that's important? This first paragraph tells me all about how he's painting, how he uses a stick to dip into the paint. He's not using a brush, he's using a stick. And then after he dips the stick in the paint, he's not painting, he's letting it drip. He's circling, walking around that canvas. He's straddling it, which means it's in the middle or in between his legs, in the middle of his legs, and he's just letting the stick drip the paint all over the canvas. We know that he's also spraying different colors like tan, teal, yellow, and white. Down here, the author continues to tell me about how he moves his body, how he uses his whole body, how he uses layers of paint, and how they all get tangled into each other. Some of those new colors pop out and then they get lost into the old ones. He swoops and leaps like a dancer, and he wants those lines to keep going and going. So I can say here, for some of my supporting details, we need at least 2 or 3 supporting details. So some things that we highlighted or talked about are he uses a stick to paint. He uses a stick instead of a brush. That's important because it tells me that he's also not painting a picture. What is happening when he uses a stick and the paint just drips on the canvas? What does he say? What do we see in the text that he wants to make longer and longer? That's right, he is drawing or painting lines. So instead of painting pictures, he's painting lines of color. So here we have 2 details. We have that he uses a stick instead of a brush to paint. He paints lines of color. I'm running out of space here, so I'm going to say and. And another thing that we learned is that he's using his whole body. He's straddling the canvas, which means that it's in between his legs. He is moving around like a dancer. He's leaping, which means that he's jumping. These are not usually things that we think about when we think about painting. But the author spends the whole page telling us all about these different movements. So for our last detail, we can say he uses his whole body to paint. Not just his arm, not just his hand, but his whole body. That is what he uses to paint. So we have our step 1. We know that the who or what is Jackson Pollock. And we have our step 2, which are details. 3 supporting details that tell us more about that topic are, just like that stool, if we think about the details supporting it, holding it up. The details are he uses a stick instead of a brush, he paints lines of color, and he uses his whole body. All of those things tell us about the topic. They tell us about Jackson Pollock. So now for step 3, we need to practice making an inference, which means we're going to take our clues and our topic and put them together to think about the main idea. Never on this page does it say the main idea is, which is why we're going to practice being good readers by using our clues to make an inference. So if we think about the main idea, what's the most important thing the author wants us to learn about Jackson Pollock, we can say the main idea is Jackson Pollock has a different style of, let me move this here so we can read it, painting. Alrighty, I know that it runs into my stool here, but I'll put it here at the top so we know that's the main idea. The main idea is Jackson Pollock has a different style of painting. That sentence tells me the topic. It tells me my who or what, which is Jackson Pollock, and it doesn't go on and on and on. It just, about his style of painting, it just tells me that the big idea, what the author wants me to know, is that his style of painting is different. To prove it, we can go back and look at those supporting details. His style of painting is different because he uses a stick instead of a brush, he paints lines of color instead of regular pictures, and he uses his whole body. Those are all things that we found in the text to find and infer our main idea, and because we inferred it, we can use these details to show our thinking. Because like I said before, never in the text does it say, this is the main idea. That's why we have to practice using our steps to find it. Now that we've gotten a little bit of practice with the main idea, I want us to also practice plugging it in. We're going to practice our plug it in strategy, which we talked about at the beginning, and that's when we find a word that we don't know and we want to plug the meaning back into the text instead of the word to see if it makes sense. So here we have the same page, and we're going to practice following these steps to do the plug it in strategy. Tomorrow, we will continue to practice main idea. Today, you are going to practice plugging it in for your exit ticket. So this part is super important. It says, what does the word gesture mean on this page? So we just read this page, so I'm not going to read it again. But for step 1, we do need to go back and find the word gesture. So I'm going to highlight the word gesture, which is here in the second paragraph. An athlete with a paintbrush, he uses his whole body to make the painting. Layers build with each gesture, new colors emerging, blending, and disappearing into the wet surface. I'm going to stop reading there because I've already done step 1, which was to find the word. Step 2 says that I need to go back and reread the sentence. So I need to read the sentence again. If I know that the word gesture is here, I'm going to look at the period that comes before it and the period that comes after it. So I know where that sentence is that I need to reread. The sentence starts here with the word layers and ends with the word surface. While I read the sentence again, think about the word gesture and why it's important in this sentence. What does the word gesture mean in this sentence? Layers build with each gesture. New colors emerging, blending, and disappearing into the wet surface. So I know that layers build with each gesture. So gesture must be some sort of action or something that Jackson is doing because it's telling me that layers build with it. I also know that that new gesture is making new colors. So it's doing two things. It's making layers and it's making colors. And like I said, we know it's an action. Step 3 says that we need to cover up the word. And we're going to try to, we're going to combine steps 3 and 4. We're going to cover up the word and we're going to plug in our best guess to see what makes sense in this sentence to figure out what it is that we know about this word. So I'm going to cover it up with, let's see if this works, with all these stars. So now we can't see that word gesture anymore. So now we're done with step 3. And like I said before, we know that the word gesture is important because in this sentence, it's making layers and it's making colors. So if it's making layers and it's making colors, two things I can think of that have layers and that have colors is a rainbow. So we're going to practice plugging it in. When we get to the word gesture, because it's covered up, instead of saying gesture, I'm going to say rainbow. You're going to think about, does the word rainbow make sense in the sentence if we plug it in? Let's see. Layers build with each rainbow. New colors emerging, blending, and disappearing into the wet surface. Does the word rainbow make sense in this sentence? Do we think gesture means rainbow? Rainbows make layers. They have layers of colors, but do they actually make layers? What are these layers that the author is talking about? If we go back in the text, since we've already read this page, we know that the layers are different layers of paint. And we know that as pretty as rainbows are, and rainbows have lots of colors, they don't actually have paint. So for example, the word rainbow does not make sense in this sentence. And now I do have a new clue thinking about the word layers. If I know that layers is referring to the word paint, I know that Jackson Pollock is painting. And I know that he's painting by moving his body. So if he's moving, can I plug in the word movement into the sentence? Let's plug it in and check. When I read the sentence, instead of saying the word gesture, I'm going to say the word movement. Your job is to think, does the word movement in this sentence make sense? Layers build with each movement. New colors emerging, blending, and disappearing into the wet surface. So we tried the word movement. You heard me read it in the sentence. And if we go back and think, he's making layers, which means that the paint is stacking on top of each other. And I also know from reading this page that he is just dripping that stick. And he's dripping it again. And he's dripping it again because he's walking around in circles on the canvas. And he is doing that by moving his body. And it makes sense that that would make layers of paint. So can we say that the word movement makes sense in this sentence? Yes. we can use this plug it in strategy to say the word gesture means movement. And if we look at the second part of the question, what does the word gesture tell us about Jackson? It tells us how he's painting. He's not just painting with a regular paintbrush or sitting down like an artist. He's moving around the whole canvas. So the word gesture tells us Jackson is using movements, just what that word means, to paint. So just something as small as one word, just something as small as the word gesture, helps us understand the text. How? If we look at that second question, we know that the word gesture is important because it's how Jackson paints. He uses movement to make paintings. He's not just sitting there coloring in with his paintbrush. No, he's using his whole body. So that using the plug it in strategy to figure out what a word means like gesture is always something that good readers practice to understand the text better. In the next video, I'm going to show you what word you have to find out what it means using the same plug it in strategy. So if you're not sure how to plug it in, you need to watch this video again and think about the steps. If you're ready, keep going. If you're not sure, practice again so you're ready for your exit ticket.